Hey, what's up, everybody? For the first time, No Edit Book Reviews is participating in a BookTube tag event, Book Trek 2023, where you got to read at least one Star Trek novel during June, July, and August. Book Trek 2023 was created by Vin at Revenant Reads, and I put a link to his channel in the description. You'll also see a link to a channel called Read by Fred. He's the person who told me about this event. So if you like books, and frankly, who doesn't, you'll like these guys. Check them out. So Fred was kind enough to invite me to participate in Book Trek 2023, and I thought, not only does this sound like a really fun way to be more social on BookTube, but it just so happens that a few months ago I bought some Star Trek novels at a used bookstore, and I've been wanting to read one of them. You book lovers know how it is when your TBR grows faster than you can chip away at it. So thank you to Fred for telling me about this event. This was the motivator I needed to read this book, and I'm really glad I did because this book was better than I had anticipated. We're looking at Grounded by David Bischoff. This is book number 25, and I believe the final book in the pocketbook Star Trek The Next Generation series. David Bischoff was a fairly prolific writer, doing mostly novels and books for TV shows like this one, as well as writing actual episodes for TV shows. He co-wrote two The Next Generation episodes, Tin Man and First Contact. That's First Contact, the episode, not the movie. So let me read you the back of this book. While answering a distress call from a scientific station in a remote part of the galaxy, the USS Enterprise becomes infected with a mysterious alien life form which feeds on and transforms inorganic materials. The starship begins to gradually disintegrate, and Starfleet is forced to order its evacuation and destruction to prevent the dangerous infection from spreading throughout the galaxy. It's the end of an era for Captain Picard and his crew, who are scheduled for transfers that will split them up among different Starfleet vessels. But even as the end draws near for the Starship Enterprise, Captain Picard begins to formulate a desperate plan to save his ship and preserve his crew, a plan that will force him to defy Starfleet orders and lead him to a confrontation with the malevolent alien force which has the power to destroy the entire Federation. So that's the opening to our story, and this review will contain some very mild spoilers. We begin with the crew of the Enterprise in a space station awaiting the demolition of their ship after Admiral Davies pronounces it a total loss after being corrupted by the alien force. So from the first page, it's a very high stakes situation. This book very much felt like a Next Generation movie or a long episode. For Grounded, Bischoff uses the format of beginning with the setup at a current moment in time, and then after that, for most of the book, we go back in time to show how we got to that point. And the end of the novel is what happens after that introductory setup. I always thought that this was an interesting and effective way to change time periods. In some books, this can be a little confusing or disorienting, but Bischoff does this in a very friendly way, and it's very easy to understand. You won't get confused with this book. Grounded features all of the main characters from the Next Generation show, except Wesley Crusher, so no loss there. And the author did a pretty good job of balancing page time for each of the characters and making sure that everyone has an important role in the story. He also introduces a few new characters for this story. There's Penelope, an autistic girl that Deanna Troi pairs up with Data so that they can learn from each other. And then there's Michael and Adrian Tillstrom, a mother and son who were the ones that sent out the distress call in the beginning of the novel. They're doing scientific research out on a remote planet, and their research station seems to have been attacked, but the crew doesn't find any aliens or anything there, just bodies and the two survivors. And over the course of the novel, we find out what happened and how these characters become important to the story. I noticed the author did a good job of introducing and foreshadowing ideas in the novel that all come together towards the end of the story. Things he adds always end up serving the story eventually. Bischoff was pretty good with using the setup and payoff in his writing. This novel incorporates romance subplots, I guess to give it some more dynamic, including a flashback scene to a fling that Picard had when he was in the academy. While reading some of these relationship scenes, it did come off a little bit YA at times, but there's also some mild gore and violence. And Bischoff develops the idea of autism being linked with psychic powers. That was interesting. Also, the story has elements of mystery and trying to figure out what happened at the research station and what exactly is going on with each of these characters. They do use the convenient writing cliche of a character with a gradually improving case of amnesia to service the developing plot. I thought that was kind of cheap. Something I thought the book did very well was the creative concept for the alien enemy. This is a silicone-based life form, and although from the crew's point of view, the thing is a malevolent killer, really it's just another form of life trying to live and expand, and part of that happens to involve eradicating carbon-based life. This is, of course, in complete opposition to the Prime Directive that governs Starfleet, which says not to interfere with the development of life, but that's kind of tricky when it's trying to kill you. Another thing I liked about this book was the author's use of technical concepts and sci-fi elements. It was clear that he wanted to do more than just tell a good story. He really did a good job making this a Star Trek product. With Grounded, you knew you were reading a Star Trek novel. It felt like the author really understands these characters, and I was impressed how he really captured each of the different characters' personalities in the writing. This novel came out in 1993, towards the end of the show's run, so it had the benefit of all the Next Generation lore, and there was a number of references to things that have happened in the show. There were times, though, when the dialogue did sound a little robotic, like characters never using contractions and overly formal word choice, things like that, but it certainly wasn't a deal breaker. This was my first Star Trek novel. The only other Star Trek book I've read was the Ferengi Rules of Acquisition, which was also pretty good. Reading Grounded, it was clear that David Bischoff knows how to write. Between things like well-crafted time jumps, good setups, good character arcs, for the new characters at least, good use of transitions between characters, it was like he went by a checklist of good writing devices, and I was surprised that the novel was as good as it was. Grounded was a pretty fun experience, and I'm glad I finally read one of these Star Trek novels, so thank you again to Read by Fred for telling me about this event. Okay, that's it for this one, guys. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Have you guys read any Star Trek novels? Do you know of any that are especially good? I keep hearing that Imzadi is really good. Do you have a favorite Star Trek book or a favorite author? Would you be interested in participating in Book Trek 2023? If so, these books are very easy and cheap to get. They're fun to read, and there's a pretty big selection. Or you could always check out Grounded by David Bischoff. Until then, guys, live long and prosper.